Hi, welcome to VRES RT Study Hall videos. In the last video, we talked about triggering mechanisms. In this video, we're going to concentrate on the limiting mechanism. First, let's just take a quick moment to review breath delivery. When we did our first video, we talked about the triggering mechanism. That's what starts the breath. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the limiting mechanism. That's going to be what is delivered during inspiration. And then in the next video, we'll talk about the cycling mechanism, which is what is actually going to end the breath. Limiting variables are really based more on our controlling variables and then some additional settings. Typically, when we're talking about limiting variables, we're really talking about either being pressure or volume, and that is because we typically want to do pressure-controlled ventilation or volume-controlled ventilation. No matter what limiting variable you're using, the definition really is that it's going to control the breath and not exceed the set value. So for volume, volume will not exceed the set tidal volume. For pressure, pressure will not exceed the set inspiratory pressure. And then flow rate kind of comes in more for volume control than anything else. But we will set a flow rate, and then that flow rate will remain the same and not exceed the set value. So now we're really going to hone in on the actual mechanisms themselves. So let's look at pressure first. This is going to be used in pressure control or pressure support modes. We can set an inspiratory pressure or we can set a pressure support. The patient's going to get that pressure throughout inspiration, and that's why this waveform looks square. Sometimes it's a little rounder on our pressure support breaths. This is a pressure control breath. One of the things that people get confused on is they think when I'm in pressure control or even volume control, they think that when I reach that set pressure, that's what's cycling the ventilator off. But that's not actually what's happening. You'll notice in this example that I have an inspiratory pressure of 30. That inspiratory pressure of 30 is given throughout the breath. What actually cycles this is going to be time, and we'll talk about that on the next video. The important thing to remember is that when I'm pressure targeting, I'm going to set a pressure and it's going to deliver that pressure for the entire breath. When we are volume limiting or volume targeting, this is going to be for your volume control modes. We're going to set a tidal volume, and that patient's going to get that tidal volume during inspiration. And last is flow limiting. Here, a flow rate is set. When the flow is set, it remains constant throughout the breath, just like with pressure control, and that is why you get a square flow waveform. However, this type of waveform can often be changed, but traditionally, when you're in volume control and you have a set inspiratory flow and you are limiting flow, that results in this square pattern. So if you see a question that talks about a breath being volume targeted and flow limited, think volume control. Few other things to note. Just remember that targeting or limiting means that you are telling the ventilator not to exceed a set value. It does not end the breath. That is the cycling mechanism. We are typically targeting either pressure or volume. Flow is potentially an additional limiting mechanism in volume control ventilation. And one last thing, we'll talk about it a little more in the cycling area. The pressure limit alarm is not a limiting mechanism. The pressure limit alarm will end the breath if it goes off. In other words, we set a high pressure limit of, say, 40 centimeters of water. If the breath were to reach 40 centimeters of water, the machine will turn it off, even if the set parameters were not delivered. But this is not a limiting mechanism. This actually ends up being a cycling mechanism because it ends the breath. This was a super quick video, but you will find more information, more practice, more ways to kind of play with this information on my website in the mechanical ventilation course at www.myvresp.com. You can access this first lesson for free. Just go into creating accounts and put in your email and a password. Then you can go into mechanical ventilation, intro part 1, and you'll find cycling mechanisms, limiting mechanisms, triggering mechanisms, all in that mechanics and breath delivery section. Happy studying!